Welcome to It's Been How Long? The podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students from the late 1970s and early 80s. This is Kara Siegel. Okay, I'd like to welcome Rob Thurston into the podcast studio, my office. Hey, Rob, welcome to It's Been How Long?
Thank you, Kara. It's great to be here. And it at least, well, for you and I, it's been a couple of years, but then even before that, it was
Yeah.
maybe a couple of decades.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you agreeing to be on the podcast. And here we are, 40 years plus. What are you up to?
Well, as we've talked about, I'm kind of in this transition mode of going sort of retirement, but not really retirement. So I'm retiring from the practice of law, which I've done, I don't know, 36 or so years. Close up my practice, which is harder than what I thought it would be. And then moving to England, London, England, and opening up a bike shop. So yeah, that's quite a bit.
Yeah, it sure is. So, what are you doing for fun these days?
Well, for fun, mostly kind of, well, when I'm in the US, I spend a lot of time with my son. And I cycle and and those kinds of things. But when I'm in London, it's great because it's a very active city. There's doing all kinds of things. We go to um, uh, we did one already, and we're going to do another, which is the taping of a TV show, which I'd
Oh,
never done before in my life. And that was really fun when we went to the first one. The first one was a taping where they show the next day on TV. This one that I'm going to when I get back in August is a live recording. So that'll
yeah.
be kind of interesting. So that's an example. We've done all kinds of other things. There's plays and there's just walking around the cafes or cycling around London. So there's lots to do. It's fun.
Oh, that's great. So, did you do some of these activities back in high school, or what were your high school activities?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's changed a little bit. I mean, I guess um for school, when I was in school, the extracurricular activities I did mostly were, well, I was a swimmer. I did a lot of stuff in the theater, a lot of stage stuff. I did, and in fact, it's funny because I did cycle there, but never, it was just more of a means of transportation rather than something that was for exercise and fun. But so I'd say that's probably the only thing that's similar. Um, Although I'd say back then, as far as like fun things, go to movies, get together with friends and those kinds of things. So that's more difficult, mostly because we're so geographically spread out now.
Yeah. So you don't see yourself in the West End in the theater when you move to London?
No, at least not in the backstage part of it. So,
Um, did you have a job back in high school?
well, well, yes, sort of. I had several jobs, most of which they were so horrible that I couldn't stay very long. Um,
What was the worst?
yeah, they were really bad. I'll tell you about one of those in a second. But the first real job I had, I was a paper boy when I was a kid, but my first kind of real job was I worked for a place called Just Ice Cream. It was on Crescent Road, Crescent Embrace, more or less. There's a little shopping center there. And that was a great job, basically scooping up ice cream and they were the first ones that kind of did put like M&Ms inside the ice cream and mix it up and so forth.
Yeah.
And for some reason, and I love that job, but for some reason that business went under. Now,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the problem was. So that job went away. But then the other jobs I had were just horrible. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts on Route 70, and that was absolutely the worst job. And in fact, my mom was part of the reason I quit because she said I would bring home like a pair of jeans and she'd wash them and they would still be gross even after the washing once or twice. And literally after about a week of that, she'd have to throw those jeans out. I'd have to get a new pair. So she was like, all right, listen, it's not worth buying a new pair of jeans to have this job. And then I had a couple other kind of like small jobs, but nothing was really, yeah, well, I did some lifeguarding and things like that, but yeah, nothing
Where,
really that great.
locally? Did you lifeguard locally? One of the
Yeah,
clubs?
so the lifeguarding was I one place was in Pine Hill that I did, and what was the other place I lifeguarded? Somewhere in the area, and I can't remember exactly where. I might have been Clementon or something, but not far away. Not in Cherry Hill, I don't think. I don't think I had any lifeguarding gigs in Cherry Hill. Oh,
Mm.
and I worked at the gas station. The mobile gas station was on Crescent Road where that 7-Eleven is, right by
Yeah,
Heritage
yeah.
School. Yeah. I worked there for um summers and Christmas breaks a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that Jersey still pumps gas for people is, blowing my mind after living in the South for as many years as I have. I was up there visiting my brothers, and it was like, oh yeah, they pump for you.
Yeah, and there's only two states apparently that still do that, New Jersey and I think Oregon.
Yeah,
And I think they're thinking of Oregon's thinking of getting rid of it, but it is an interesting thing because when I worked there, you it was full service as an attendant. You check their oil, you wash their windshields, their back windshields. You did all these things extra for that. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. So
no,
even in New Jersey.
yeah, yeah. So I want to backtrack to something. So you were on the swim team. So I think I kind of knew we had a swim team, but I didn't know much about it. I was friendly with Sue Ryback, and I think she swam, right?
Mhm.
Were we any good?
Oh, we were great
Yeah.
actually.
How come
And
we didn't?
there's
How come that wasn't like touted, or was it? Did I just like miss the morning announcement that?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. Because it did kind of fly under the radar a lot,
I
and
thought so.
hmm, other sports were so big. Football, soccer, basketball was pretty big.
Yeah.
I don't know how big the baseball was, but yeah. So swimming kind of flew under the. Oh, wrestling I think was pretty big
Hmm.
too. I think. But for some reason, swimming. But yeah, we were really good. In fact, we were state champs for many, many years. I think until my senior year was the first year we were not state champs. I think we came in second or third from. I know St. Joe's Metuchen was like won the state championships our senior year.
Yeah.
And we had, I mean, people were
Yeah.
on the swim team. Steve Goldhirsch was
Yeah.
on the swim team. He's
Right.
actually a really good swimmer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Steve Gillette was a
Yeah.
diver.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So yeah, I mean, you knew most of the people that were
Right.
probably on the swim team, especially the girls swim team. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just didn't. Again, I'm trying to think. I thought we were good, but I don't think you guys ever got the publicity that's.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I don't think so. You're right.
Oh, wow.
Maybe I'm getting it now through the
There you go.
podcast,
We're
right?
getting
Maybe
through the
this.
podcast. We're
I'll
getting your
I'll take
kudos.
the props through the podcast on behalf of the
Absolutely.
swim
What
team.
while we're at it, what stroke did you swim? Or
So
strokes?
my main stroke was butterfly.
Oh wow, that
Um,
is
and
hard.
yeah, and I did the 200-meter butterfly, which was 8 laps of the
Yeah,
pool,
that's a lot.
and it was brutal. But I also did freestyle as well.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. Cool. Uh, so what'd you do after graduation? Now you can answer this question like any Denkin and tell me where you went to dinner, or you could, give me a little bit broader, more global
Yeah.
answer.
All right. So I have a great story about around our graduation, and then I'll tell you what happened, what I did after that. So that summer, and I think our graduation was June 10th, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right.
So within those couple days, all
Mm-hmm.
of these events happened. My grandparents came to visit us in Cherry Hill. And so within all of those days, and I can't remember the exact day of it, except my brother's birthday, but there was my, oh yeah, look at that, 10th of June. How about that? That's great.
You're on the mark.
Um, yeah. So, well, you'll know by the story why I remember that so distinctly, because my grandparents came. It was their 50th wedding anniversary,
Hmm.
so we celebrated that. My oldest brother got married that weekend.
Oh, wow.
My brother Dana's birthday was June 13th. And there was something else that happened then too. But all these events were around there. So our graduation was like, okay, there's this other thing we got to do. Yeah, well, big deal. So I I totally was slighted from that.
It hasn't
But
scarred you at all.
no, no. And you know what, frankly, it's a vague memory. So um but yeah, so after graduation, obviously played for the summer. And then and I worked, but then I went to George Washington University,
Oh,
my first 2 years of college.
okay. Did you
And
like the city?
I like DC. Yeah, that was really great. GW though wasn't for me, and for many reasons. I mean, I think the main thing was it was neat to be in Washington D.C., but it's not really a neat place to go to college. For me, college was grassy fields and a sports stadium and things like that, and it was totally not that experience. So yeah.
So did you transfer?
Yeah, so I transferred after my sophomore year up to Michigan. And I remember I was so thrilled to find that out. And it's funny because our classmate, Mike Weisbach, who
Yeah.
still, he's probably the person of our class that I've known the longest, either him or Celine Flynn,
Hmm.
because we both grew up in the same neighborhood, and we both went to the same swim club and all those things. So I've known them since I was probably 6 or 7 years old. But Mike Weisbach had gone to Michigan. He actually graduated early, if you
Yeah.
remember.
Okay.
He graduated in December from high school and
Uh,
went early. He might have been, I don't even know if I can't remember when he graduated, but I know it was early, and he went to Michigan early. But for some reason, we didn't connect at all while we are at Michigan.
oh, really?
So yeah, but yeah, I spent my last 2 years of college at Michigan. Yeah.
And after that, did you go directly to law school or?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm one of these really, like, either I don't know if you call me masochistic or stupid, but literally I did not have a break in school from kindergarten through law school. I think if I did it over again, if I went to law school at all, which I'm not sure I would, but I would have definitely taken a break, maybe a year break, and then gone back to law school, because it was just brutal to be in school,
Yeah.
from whatever we are 5 years old to into kindergarten through, I don't know, I forget how old I was. I
25
probably
probably.
shouldn't say on this podcast. But yeah,
We all
so
know, dear.
24,
We all know.
25.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so I went directly to law school. I went to
There
Ohio
in
State
oh, you want to,
for law
oh,
school.
really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Which,
really must have pulled on your whole. You must have gone with Michigan. You go with Michigan for your football. Yeah.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it was funny because yeah, that's right. It's such a huge rivalry. But I think most people feel like I do, which is that your loyalties are to your undergraduate school.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, but there was so we had a class of about, I think, 300 people that entered with me at law school, 23 of which were Michigan grads.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, actually, if you don't mind, I'll tell
Yeah.
you a funny story about that,
Please do.
which is so Ohio State was on the undergrads were on quarters, law school was on semesters. So we started earlier than they did, than the undergrads did. So I got onto campus, and there was pretty much almost no one there, and except for the law school students who were about to start. And I remember going to the student union where there was a food court there, and I had a Michigan shirt on. Kind of didn't even really think about that, right? Well, it was okay. That was not real smart, but it was just kind of a normal attire at the time. So I go in, I think I might have gone to Subway and got a Subway sandwiches. And I'm sitting there in the food court eating, and all of a sudden I hear clump, clump, clump. I'm like, what the heck is that? In walks the Ohio State football team going through the student union. This guy who was probably about, I don't know, 8 foot tall and 400 pounds, looks over at me, all muscle, looks over at me and goes, "Nice shirt, buddy." And I went, "Oh no, I've been here a week, I'm gonna die."
That's right.
Yeah. So
But you live to tell the tale.
I did.
So after Yeah. So after law school, did you stay in the Midwest? And
No, I actually I did interview for some jobs in Chicago, and I kind of wanted to go to Chicago. In fact, I got a job with the state's attorney there, which is
hmm,
their public defender, not public defender. I'm sorry, it's a prosecutor in Chicago. I got an offer from them, but my mom said, "Look, we'd really like you to come back to the East Coast." And I said, "Okay, that's fine." So yeah, so I got a job back on the East Coast in Morristown with a law firm, and yeah, so that's I kind of got started there.
okay. And but I mean, eventually you moved back to the Midwest. So how did your career evolve?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I worked for actually two firms here on the East Coast, and then kind of developed a little bit of a specialty at the time, which was these big insurance cases that dealt with environmental claims, asbestos claims,
Hmm,
and so forth. So because I kind of had that specialty and started, working on cases, a friend of mine said, "Oh, there's this job in Chicago, this firm in Chicago that needs someone with kind of that specialty. Would you be interested in coming?" And I said, "Absolutely, I would." Because at that point, my old college roommate had moved to Chicago, and I knew several other people in Chicago from law school as well. And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I interviewed for the job, and it was great. And I said, "Yeah, absolutely, I would love to go." So yeah, that moved me out to Chicago, and that's where really kind of I spent a large part of the next, I'd say, 20 some years. Yeah.
okay. When did you develop? Aren't you now a child advocate lawyer? That specialty that's become a real um,
Yes.
area of
Yeah.
expertise for you. When did that develop?
So my older son was 9 years old. Well, by the way, it's just kind of aside, but before, as he was growing up, we saw some quirks and some things going on, but we didn't really think much about it. And be honest with you, I had no idea what autism was at that time. No understanding, never even really heard the term. And it was not really that prevalent in any kind of discussions about kids, students. When he was about 9 years old, and at the same time, my wife had gotten really sick, and he went into crisis between his mom being real ill and him really struggling in school with dealing with the social aspects of school. Very, very smart kid, but had troubles. So he, we took him to a crisis center, and they wanted to send him away to a facility, and I'm like, no way. I said, at this point, with his mom being sick and him having struggles in school, the last thing he needs is to be taken away from his father and his brother. So um so we went, and he got diagnosed with autism. So I'm like, what the heck is autism? Literally, and this is how I handle just everything in life. If there's something I don't know, I go and I get like 15 books on the topic. I start researching. So anyway, so I started helping him as far as not only dealing with the autism, getting him therapies and so forth, but also realizing that his struggles in school, I kept saying there's got to be some laws that deal with this. So I did. I did research on the special education law and found, wow, there's this whole body of law. And so this was about 2010 timeframe ballpark. And I said, if I'm struggling with this, I'm actually a lawyer, and I'm learning these laws that are out there and didn't know about it before. I would be willing to bet there are many parents out there with kids with some kind of disability who don't know these laws exist. And so, really, 2010, 2011, I said, you know what? I should start to develop this as a side project. By the way, in 2005, I had started my own practice. So I was doing
Okay.
general practice stuff at that point. Um, and I was doing wills and business litigation and various different things. So I added that special education to my practice about that time frame, about 2011 or so. And so I just started developing it, and sure enough, I found thousands of families didn't know that this was an area of law, didn't know what their rights were, and needed help. So that's where that kind of developed. You know,
Wow. Yeah. And then did that become the majority of your practice? Because I know you've.
I'd say over the course of the next, say 3, 4, 5 years, it actually kind of became first, it grew and grew. It very quickly became 50 to 60% of my practice. Whereas I'd say for the last kind of at least 5 years, maybe even as close to 10 years, it's been almost 100% of my practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a real loss to the community, you shutting down your practice.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd say that, but because luckily there's been other
Uh,
practitioners, but yeah, there's still too few of us
sure.
doing this work. Yeah.
Yeah. So so catch us up. So now you are heading into semi-retirement, and tell us about that journey.
Okay. So this actually started before the pandemic. Um, and I started thinking, at some point, this was, how old was I then? So I turned 60 in what, 2022. So, this was a couple years before 60, but I said, I don't want to do this, for the rest of my life. And I've had colleagues, frankly, who, they would go to the office every day, even they were 88, 89, 90 years old. And all of a sudden one day, and in the office. And I've said that's not going to be me.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to retire? Whatever. So I'd say probably 2019 was kind of the time frame I started thinking about all this. And I said, okay, well, I need a plan. I know I can't just say tomorrow I'm stopping. And I'm sure you experienced that same kind of idea, right? You just can't just say, I'm done. I'm walking out the door. I'm not coming back. So,
No, that doesn't
um,
work that way.
yeah, right, right. And sometimes it takes a while to figure that out, right? You
Yeah.
think, oh, I'm just done. Well, no, you can't be just done. So that's when the plan started evolving. And I'm going, what can I do? Well, I've actually wanted to own a bike shop for a long time, many, many years. So I said, well, maybe that would be something I could do. How do I make that happen? So obviously, you're doing your work during the day, and so you spend some time kind of doing your plan and thinking how these things are going to all fit together. Well, then the pandemic hit, and I saw the impact on that in many ways. For example, my mom, who's in a senior facility and still is, but was at the time, could not see her, could
Right.
not go to see her. The only way I had to communicate with her was by phone initially, and then I taught her how to use Zoom. Imagine what it's like to 85-plus-year-old woman teaching her how to use Zoom. So, but that's okay. So that was good. At least it was a way to see her face and communicate with her. And then my younger son, his last 4 months of high school was remote,
Yeah.
and so I said, this is not good. And basically my practice sort of shut down, sort of didn't shut down, but sort of shut down. I mean, there was work I could do remotely, but the courts were all closed,
Right.
everything was closed. So I said, okay, that kind of really was the impetus to me that said, I've got to do something different. I've got to speed up this retirement process and work on that. So then basically over the next year or so, I started developing the plan. And like I said, that's kind of when we got together, which was I think 2021, if I'm
Yeah, it was
right.
in the
Yeah,
midst of yeah, I think that's correct.
yeah. I mean, we were still kind of in that pandemic, but we
Yeah.
were now at the stage where we could actually see people in public and
Yeah, I
things
think
like
we had
that.
already had vaccinations, but yeah,
Yeah.
we were still pretty closed in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah, still very careful. And I remember even when we sat around that table, we were
Yep.
kind of still trying to be far
Distance,
away.
yeah.
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 But so yeah, so that kind of put the plans into hyperdrive, and that's around the time when I said, okay, yeah, definitely want to do a bike shop. How do I make that work? But also at the same time, where am I going to do this? So yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked about where you're going to do this, and I'm not sure if everybody knows, but so why don't you share that information?
Okay, sure. So again, like we talked about before, but not on the podcast. But so I started thinking, okay, where would I like to retire? Okay, where is it going to be? Will I be able to do a bike shop there, or something else if that's not going to be a real possibility? Because I didn't want to just stop working and not do anything. Um, and I gave up golf a long time ago. Golf is now a four-letter word to me. So and yeah, I have hobbies, cycling and things like that, but I wanted to work. So I actually visited some of the places that I've been to before. I visited friends in Chicago. I came down to visit you guys in North Carolina. I lived in Charlotte. My oldest son was born in Charlotte, and I lived there for about a year or so. Really like Charlotte, really like North Carolina. But I started factoring in lots of things about this, and I just really couldn't point to a place that I wanted to go to and retire that I knew about in the United States. And I didn't want to be where the weathers were in either extreme at really any point of the year. The one thing I remember about Charlotte was come August and September, it is brutal.
Yeah.
And Chicago, really from about June to about May, it's brutal. No, I'm exaggerating, but the winter months are just unbearable. So I said, well, I don't want to be in one of those places. So I had been to England so many times. I said, maybe that's a possibility. And in fact, the pandemic actually kind of screwed up my first kind of trip, but in a good way. And I'll tell you that story. Yeah, so I had a trip planned to the UK for December of 2021. Again, on kind of another fact-finding trip. Would this be a place I would want to retire to? And I was going to meet up. So let me kind of segue for a second, which is that starting in 2018, I think, it might have been 2019, but I started doing this virtual cycling software. It's called Zwift, Zwift. Um, because, obviously during the warm months, you can train outside in New Jersey, but in the winter months, you have to either train inside or not train at all. So I found about this software, and it's an amazing thing. It's virtual cycling. You see up on the screen, you have an avatar that's on a bike that's cycling. But the most amazing part of this is you can cycle with people all over the world,
Oh.
and you can chat with them and while you're cycling and things like that. Well, I had developed some friendships through this software, one of which was this my friend Teresa Heaton, who she's over in England, and we were like brothers and sisters, a brother and sister, because we just got along instantly very, very well. And over the course of this year 2021, we had become like as close as brother and sister. And so I kind of had some of these discussions about retiring and being interested in England. Well, anyway, now back to the December 2021 trip. I was going to meet her, and we were going to just chat and have coffee and so forth. Well, that's when Omicron came, or
Right.
Omicron. I'm not sure how you say it, but
Omicron, yeah.
Omicron. Yeah. So that's when that hit. And I thought, well, should I go forward with this trip? I mean, they weren't canceling the trip, but it was really, discouraged. So I said, well, let me see if I can get my money back for my trip. And luckily I could. So I told Teresa, I said, listen, I can't make it this trip, but I will come as soon as things clear up again. And so forth. Well, in the meantime, I had also had discussions with Teresa about my woes as being a lonely old guy, who had lost his wife, right? And so she kept saying, well, look, I'll find someone for you. I'll find someone for you. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's very nice of you to say, but highly unlikely. But anyway, so one day in January, excuse me, very early in January. Now, this is right after I canceled the December trip to the UK in 2021. In early January 2022, she says to me, now I've had this conversation with someone who might be interested in chatting with you. You know, if it doesn't work out, at least you'll have a friend and this and that. And I said, okay, well, who is it? And she said, well, I'll get back to you with that. And I'm like, oh, that's cryptic. So anyway, the next day she sends me a text. She goes, well, the person I happen to be talking to is my sister. Her name's Vicky. And I said, oh, really? She said, yeah. She said, here's her number. She's on WhatsApp, which that's a different thing too. But WhatsApp is widely used in Europe,
Yeah.
very rarely used in the US. In fact, they think texting is like ridiculous over in Europe. That's like antiquated to them. So like regular texting. So
Yeah.
everything's on WhatsApp in Europe. She said, here's Vicky's number on WhatsApp. She said it's free to, go ahead and text her when you want. So I literally texted her the next day. I said, hey, I'm the silly, crazy friend of your sister Teresa's. And, so we just started chatting and again, hit it off like from day one. And so I then, the next time I was able to travel to the UK was the beginning of February, near the beginning of February. And so I planned to meet both Teresa and Vicky on that trip. And boy, that was great. We met in person. So, and we again hit it off as well as we did online. And so I said, wow, this is weird. All these pieces are coming together, right? I think England might be the place I want to move to. And on that trip, it kind of solidified that notion. Now I had met someone who was very interested in dating, and I said, the last piece would be, can I do a bike shop here? And how does an American set up a bike shop in England, right? So, my relationship with Vicky really progressed really well. I kept doing research on, how to immigrate to England, how to set up a business, all those kinds of things. And then kind of the tail end of the story is, well, not the complete end, but to bring this around to the retirement plan. In August of 2022, Vicky came over to the US to visit and visited my mom, and she had met Nigel already at this point. I brought Nigel to one of my trips to the UK. In 2022, I was back and forth between the UK and the US. I can't even remember how many times. It was almost every other month. And so she came to the US in August, and we're sitting on the balcony having coffee. And I'm
Not
telling her about my
surprising.
retirement plan.
Not
Wait,
tea,
right?
coffee.
Yeah, coffee, right. My real true love and hobby is coffee.
Yeah.
Um, and luckily hers is too. That's something else we have in great common. So we're sitting on the balcony chatting, and I'm telling her about my idea that, I had this idea of retiring to England before I had even met her, but that it was really neat that it fell in place that she was there. And I said, I really would like to open up a bike shop. And she goes, well, what's funny? I've always wanted to open up a cafe in England, and because she's a English tutor, and she does online lessons to students. And so we started talking about it. We said, why don't we open up a bike shop and cafe combination and kind of like have this as our business that we can kind of both leave our prior careers with? And we were like, boom, genius. So that started the development, and now we're pretty far along the way. The only thing really left to do now is get a physical shop, and we're off and running. So
That's so
yeah,
exciting.
so
Yeah. And this is
that's
all
how
gonna,
that transition.
yeah, this is kind of take place through towards the end of this year.
So end of 2022 into 2023 is where we really made progress, and we found a bike company to sell their bikes, and everything. So I'm going back there at the end of this month, and so August and September we're going to do some heavy shopping for a physical shop, and hopefully be able to set that up by the early part of 2024, and be off and running. And I'm hoping somewhere in there I can close up the final cases I have, and and finish up my law practice. Yeah.
That's exciting. And naturally, there will be a discount coffee to those of us who make it to England.
Rest of 1980, you come to visit me in London, I will give you your first cup of coffee is on me.
All right. That's great. So, so you've obviously traveled a lot in England. Have you had any other opportunities to travel either in the States or the world?
Yeah, well, so that's a great question because that is really truly well. It's also been one of my hobbies over the years. Is I love travel. I traveled extensively in the US with my jobs over the
Okay.
years. Back when I was working for firms, we had cases all over the country. And actually, since I've been doing special education law, some of those cases have been all over. For those cases, just specifically, went to the Virgin Islands.
Okay.
It sounds a whole lot better than it really was. It was literally fly in,
Fly in, fly out.
hotel,
Yeah.
court, hotel, fly out. So I didn't even go to the beach any of those times.
Uh,
Um, but Hawaii, got to go, Tennessee, um, Ohio.
was there some place you
Where
got to
else?
vacation see more than the airport or?
Well, Hawaii, I did, yes, because it's such a long flight there.
Right.
You can't
Yeah.
just like go there and go to court and leave. So yeah, I turned and I took 2 trips to Hawaii for a
Mm,
client, and each time, yeah, made it about a week, a little more than a week, and made a vacation out of it. So that was nice.
yeah.
Um,
How about
but yeah,
internationally?
yeah, exactly. So yeah, but in prior jobs, I had traveled extensively for work. So, and that was mostly in the US. But for pleasure, I've traveled, well, mostly Europe. I wouldn't say not South America, nowhere in the Asia
Hmm.
or the eastern part of the world, but yeah, extensively in Europe. I love traveling through Europe. I've been to Germany several times, France several times, Switzerland, Austria, yeah, I mean, Italy a lot.
Do you have a favorite
I don't know,
trip or
most of those countries in Europe. Yeah.
do you have a favorite trip that you
Favorite trip? That's a great question. I mean, really, every trip I come back from, I guess my favorite trip is this, and this is also a good story. My very first trip to Europe, which was in 1989.
hmm,
And so my itinerary, because that was my first trip, I just wanted to hit major cities: London, Paris, Munich, and Amsterdam. That was my itinerary, about 3 or 4 days in each of those places. Um, and but I got to Paris. And by the way, that trip was just amazing overall. But this is the best part of that trip, why I put it up with probably my favorite, which is sitting in a cafe in Paris. Guess what I'm drinking? Coffee.
copy?
And I'm reading the International Herald Tribune. Now, this was November of 1989. I don't know if that rings any bells to anybody, but here it is on the front page of the newspaper: Berlin Wall is falling. I
Yeah.
thought, oh my goodness. I'm a history buff. I was a German major in college, one of my majors. That history has always fascinated me, World War II and the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall, if you recall, was built the year we were born in
Mm,
1962.
okay.
So I thought, wow, this is just, I have to alter my itinerary. I have to get to Berlin and see this. And I did. So after Munich, I went up to Berlin. I have pictures of the wall, people at the wall chopping pieces. I actually went up to the wall. Somebody said, "You want to chisel away some pieces?" I said, "Absolutely, I would." And so I gave that person my camera, and most of this was in German, by the way. So I'm speaking German to these people, and handled me a chisel and a hammer, and chiseled off some pieces, which I still have today, of the Berlin Wall. And there's pictures of me there. It was just an amazing experience that I'll never forget until I die. So
Wow.
yeah,
That is something. That is, you were part of history.
yeah, it was neat.
Wow. So, let me segue here a little bit. So, was there any class or teacher at East that really influenced you well beyond high school years?
Um, That's a great question. I'd say there's three. My favorite teachers, and all three kind of really had a big role. One was Peggy Beck, who taught English. I had her for junior year English. I don't know if it was honors or A level. I can't remember, but um, she was phenomenal because she really taught me how to write a paper, how to write a term paper, how to write with, resources and things like that, bibliography. But the other great thing was she really exploded my love of reading and reading good literature. I had already been reading Kurt Vonnegut books, and he was one of my favorite authors, still is. But during her course, I came to love John Steinbeck and Ernest Hemingway. And between those three, those are my three all-time favorite authors. But that love of that classic literature was in her class. Um, Number two was my German teacher, Karl Mullman. Really nice guy. So there was somebody else teaching German our freshman and sophomore years. Carl came in our junior year, literally fresh off the boat from Germany. Young guy, really energetic, and really inspired me to continue studying German, and ultimately became one of my majors in college. So he was really good. And then the third was a teacher we shared, which was Ed Simon.
Who?
And remember Ed Simon for what was the course called? It was a social studies class.
Because we
It's
were
the
in
one where
Betsy
I
Mc...
have the story about you
Oh,
in.
okay, okay. So I was saying we had best. I remember you from Betsy McCleister's class. Do you remember?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
No, I never had her.
you didn't.
Cleister? No, no, no.
Mc...
You remember me from Simon's class, and
Oh, okay,
I'll tell
okay,
you that story in a second.
all right.
Ed Simon taught foreign policy, was it, or something like that?
Hang on, I'm looking this
I
up.
think
No,
it
go
was
ahead.
foreign policy.
Okay.
Well, anyway, we were in
Yeah.
that class together. As a teacher, he was again really good. Really made, and that was a very key time in history, if you remember, 79 to 80, because that's
Yeah.
when the whole Iran hostage situation took place.
Yeah.
That was, all a lot of big events happened in 79 as far as foreign policy was. Um, and that segues me to the story I have about you, which is just this great story. So I remember that
So
we
this is
were
our
in that
senior year. This
class,
is our senior year because I had
senior
McCleister
year.
junior year. Okay.
Yeah. See,
All right.
I never had McCleister. Mm-mm,
Really? God, I
I don't think so.
swear.
No,
All
but
right.
here's the story,
Okay.
and maybe this will jog your memory.
Yeah.
Um, so we were talking about, how to handle, what to do from a diplomatic, or what to do as a foreign policy perspective about the whole Iran hostage crisis. And and I, I, I remember I was leaning back on my chair. Remember those chairs in high
Okay.
school?
Okay.
You
So
would
that
kind of
was,
lean
I
back.
thought that was Betsy's class. No, so that was Simon's class. Okay. No, I remember this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was Simon's class.
Okay.
And I said something to the fact of, let's bomb them back to the Stone Age, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
you said something like, "Oh, Thurston," or something to that effect.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I that is my vivid memory of you from high school. It's like I think we had one. I remember one class. I remember that one thing. You leaning back on that chair, and it's like bomb them back to the Stone Age. Like,
Yeah,
jeez.
yeah. That was
Yeah.
Simon's class. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. I always thought that was McCleister's class, but that was Simon's class. That's funny. Oh my goodness. So do you have any friends with friends from East that you're still in touch with?
Oh yeah. I mean, tons, really. And again, that we talked about this before recording, but Facebook really was a haven for me when I joined in about 2007, and for the next several years, I was still out in Illinois, and I was kind of isolated to some extent because my wife's family at the time was in Minnesota. My family is still back here in New Jersey, at that time was when my wife started to get sick, and so Facebook was a way to reach out and reconnect with people, and really most of those people from our class that I connected with then, I'm still in touch with now. I
Yeah.
mean, kind of the strongest friends are Eddie Denkin, Scott Wisher, Jeff Lyons, but many others. Eric Muller and I were, well, I'd say up until recently, until the Facebook algorithm took it out of the scene. But Eric and I were talking quite a bit on Facebook, and because he's another one who, like me, was in a lot of theater and stage in high school, and music and things like that. So Reggie Wu,
Mm.
who I think it's funny because people had such a wrong impression of Reggie from high school. I mean, I think people thought A, he was a druggie, and B, he was just like, he was dangerous because he would have these dark glasses and his hair way down. And the reality was he wasn't a druggie at all. And he was not, he was like the sweetest, gentlest guy you'd ever want to know. Now, I knew him because we both were kind of the guitar, we played guitar, and there was kind of a circle of people who all knew each other because they played guitar. AJ Malvin was a guy, and there was a bunch of guys who were kind of our guitar circle, so to speak. And we might not even have been great friends, but yeah, I reconnected with Reggie. He still today is one of my great friends. And I mean, you, of course, and Deborah Smead. Don't call her Debbie, or you owe her $1. Um, yeah, but it's just a large number. Alan Feldman and Judy Katz, and I'm not going to name somebody, and I'm going to get in trouble for it.
Yeah,
But
no,
I a large number of our class I still stay in touch with. Yeah,
those on
mostly via
Facebook.
Facebook.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have a high school sweetheart?
No, in
Okay.
fact, I didn't go to either of the proms
Yeah.
because I didn't have a real sweetheart. I remember, this is another good story. I don't know if she'll remember this or not, but um, Lynn Raudebush,
Yeah.
that was her name at the time.
Rotabush, I
Um,
think, but
Raudebush, yeah. So she and I both didn't have steady, significant others. And we had a discussion. We said, well, since, and we were good friends, should we just go as friends to the prom? Well, then we sat there and thought about it and said, well, all the money that's involved with, renting a tux, buying a corsage, paying for the prom, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a nice thought. And we talked about it, but then we said, no, it's not worth all that money. We're just good friends. We'll just be two people who didn't go to the prom. Now, I don't know if she ended up going to the prom at all, but yeah, we both, I didn't go to either junior or senior prom because I didn't have a steady sweetheart. I wasn't going to spend my money on that really. So
so where'd you meet your wife?
no, I met my wife. That's actually a good story. So one of my law associates who I worked with in a law firm,
This was in Chicago.
she, what's that?
Was this in Chicago? Was
Yeah,
this in
this was in
Chicago?
Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she bought a bar in Chicago as a sidelight to her law practice, and and we're good friends. So I started supporting her by just showing up at the bar and and ordering
You are a
drinks and so
supportive
forth.
guy.
Well, anything to support my friends, even if if I have to buy some alcohol to do that, oh well,
What a guy.
So so anyway, so and I dated this one girl while I was out in Chicago. It just wasn't working out. So we broke up, and so my friend Lisa says, why don't you stop into the bar? I have my friend Deanna there, and she comes in and bartends sometimes. She's gonna bartend, this next weekend or something. Just stop in and say hello and meet her. I said, okay. And we met and hit it off really well. And so, and coincidentally, it was like a day or two before a trip I was taking over to England. So she said, here's my address. Send me a postcard from England. So I did, and this is a great guy story. Okay, so I wrote on the postcard. I said, when I get back, I'll give you a call. Didn't give her a call. I'm an idiot, right? So anyway, another week or so go by, and so I'm back in the bar. She sends one of her friends to kind of scout me, right, and check me out. And who, again, to this day is a dear friend. And so her name's Stephanie. So Stephanie came, and she was just chatting with me. A friend that I was there with just kept trying to hook up with her. And I didn't understand the whole dynamic that she was there to check up on me. But stop just chatting with her, and we're talking about different things. And then so she must have gone back to Deanna and said, yeah, he's okay, he's not a mass murderer, or he might be a little obsessed with coffee and some other things, but he's all right. So shortly after that, yeah, we connected and went out on a date. And yeah, it worked out really quickly. And literally from our first date to when we got married was less than a year, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah, and we got married in England.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. So what year was that?
1996.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I was already pretty old by the time I got married. 34. Yeah.
Okay, so I got married in 97, so stop talking about age.
We were late bloomers.
Well, for sure, for sure. So do you have a specific standout memory from high school that you reflect that you haven't told us about yet?
Let's see.
Could be a high, could be a low, could be anything.
Yeah, it's funny. I really only remember like good things. Luckily, my brain is very nice to me and helps me forget things that were negatives. I will tell you what. No, I do have one good negative story about this.
Okay.
And actually, it turns into kind of a very amazing good story in a way. My sophomore year, I had English with, I think her name was Mrs. Perkins.
Okay.
And she was mean. She was just mean. And I thought it was just me. And I remember she had brutal vocabulary tests that and other kinds of tests that I later found out that almost everyone got a D or failed. She had maybe one A, maybe two B's, maybe four C's, and the rest in the class was D's and F's. Mm-hmm. She did not like to give people good grades. So I thought, well, this isn't really going well. And I remember like just her whole approach to teaching was that the students were a nuisance to her, and how can you be this dumb? So I remember I went with my mom in to meet with whoever the principal was. Might have been Mr. Miles, Mark Miles. I can't remember whoever the principal was at the time. But they said, no, you cannot transfer from an A-level course to an A-level course, a different teacher. And I said, well, okay, what are my other options? He said, well, you can go from an A-level to B-level English. Okay. And I said, can I ever go back to A-level maybe the next year? He said, yeah, you can do that, but you'd have to wait till your junior year. So I went down to B-level English that year. I had Tom, he was the backstage guy. Anyway, he taught B-level English. And I remember he kept saying to me, why are you in this class? I kept saying, well, because they wouldn't let me go to another A-level class of English. So made it through the year, did very well at B-level. And I talked to whoever it was at East and said, yeah, you can go back to A-level junior year. So I was glad because I was out of Mrs. Perkins' class, and it was a horrible experience. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. Years later, and I didn't even know this, but two other people had identical experiences. Jane Baumgartner, who's now Jane Hightower, and Scott Wishart. Now, I think they were in different sections.
He's still Scott Wishart.
They weren't or maybe Jane might have been in my class and Scott was in a different section of hers. But both had identical scenarios. They were failing her class, dropped down to B-level, and then went back up to A-level junior year. So I said, okay, well then it's not me being a complete idiot. Um, Other people had the same experience, which was kind of fun to find out.
Yeah. Ah. Um, so have you had a chance to go back to the building? If so, like why and how'd you feel?
That's a really great question. And again, another good story. So when Vicky came to visit in England, I said, would you, and she had taken me to her old school and her old homes and things like that where she had lived in England on prior trips. So I said, do you want to go see where I grew up and the schools I went to? She said, I'd love to. So I drove her back past my family home, which my family lived in for 50 some years,
Mm.
until my dad passed and my mom moved out to a senior facility. This is when they sold the house, which was
What
2013,
development
I
were you
think.
in? What development were you in?
Crescent Woods.
Okay.
Yeah. So right across from Barclay Farms. So yeah, so I drove her, see my old house, drove her to see Johnson School and Heritage. But I had to call ahead. We went to the outside of those schools. We didn't go, but I called ahead to East because actually, coincidentally, Robin Garland had been up to visit like a week or so before that, and she had taken a tour of the school, but you had to make an appointment. So she said,
Hmm.
"Here, call this person." So I did. I made an appointment and got in and walked around the school. Vicky and I got, and the person who showed us around was really nice, much younger than we are, but she's like I don't know, guidance counselor or something. And walked around the school. I would say a lot of it looks the same. The walls, I don't know if you've seen this, but the walls are got almost the same paintings that were there when we were there. Um, like if you go outside the music department, it's the exact same paintings that were on the walls when we were in school there. So some of it was the same, but the sad part was some of it was really run down. The
Mm.
theater is really run down, really
Oh,
in
really?
bad shape. Some of the cafeterias not so great. Not horrible, but kind of a little more rundown. And the woman who was taking us around said, frankly, we've been trying to get more funding to fix up some of this stuff, but we just haven't gotten it from the township. So, but it was kind of fun, and it like most things in life, you're like. I remember it as being bigger and it seemed smaller and the lockers seemed like tiny, right? How do we
Yep.
fit all that stuff in those lockers? So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we're back in 1980 and you've just graduated, and you're looking down the road 40 years. Is this where you saw yourself?
Not at all. To be honest with you, although the only thing that was in my mind at that time, as far as the future was, I knew I wanted to go to law school. Um, and that was mostly because my grandfather was a lawyer and I really loved him, respected him, very smart guy, very fun guy as well. Really dry sense of humor. Yeah, I wonder where that came from. And
I'd
so
say
that was
you've
kind of
got some old man humor for sure. That's not so dry.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's true. Um,
Sorry.
but he that's what made me think, okay, yeah, I'd like to go to law school. But as far as kind of where I would be in life, I really had no idea. And it's funny because you know, I don't know I'd go back and change anything. Yeah, I haven't really loved being a lawyer. It's just not that like a fun thing to do. Um, and like physicians, right? People only come to you when they have problems. They don't come to you and say, "Hey, everything's great. Can I pay you some money to do so?" No, they come to you because something's wrong, and they have to pay you. They have to pay you money because, and they don't want to, but they got to fix the problem. But as far as how my life has progressed and things that have happened in my life, I really wouldn't change them. If it weren't for practicing law, I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have had my kids. I wouldn't have then, had to go through and learn a lot of tough life lessons. watching my wife, progress till she ultimately died. And then, learning lessons after that about, grief and things like that. But then also having like a really neat experience in meeting Vicky and knowing, the next 30 years or whatever of my life are going to be really filled with joy and happiness. So yeah, I wouldn't change those things for anything, really.
Oh, that's great. So did you enjoy high school?
Did I enjoy high school?
Let's see.
Did I enjoy high school? I would say it wasn't good or bad. It was, to me, it was a means to an end, right?
Okay.
It was, I mean, there were elements of it that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed the plays. I enjoyed swimming. I enjoyed getting to know people, people I'd known from elementary school, all the way to people I met new in junior high, and then even in high school. And actually getting to know people even better once I got to high school. So that I had maybe known a long, long time. So that was kind of neat. I like that part. As far as it, like I said, it was a means to an end. I knew that, life beyond high school was going to be different and better, and it was. So yeah.
Okay. So if you could give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, or maybe you gave your 18-year-old kids this advice, what would it be?
I think probably um it's hard to say. I've given my kids so much advice. They're like, all right, dad, enough. So um I'd say that the best thing is to two things really. One, always have a good attitude, um and that's everybody's going to face some challenges in life. Some are really severe, some are not so severe, but there are always going to be challenges. And if you try to deal with those challenges in a very negative way, you're not going to do very well. So, but if you have a good positive attitude and realize, okay, I gotta deal with this challenge. How do I deal with it? I'd say that's one important lesson. The other thing I think I would say was that you also have to, and that brings with it some element of this, which is you need to care for other people. You need to go through life, not be selfish. You need to think of other people, talk to them, listen to them. And listening, I think, is a very important part of that. But also care for them. If you are in a position to help them and they need help and they're a friend of yours, you help them. You know, if you just have to kind of care about others because really, frankly, that's what we're on this planet to do, in my opinion, right? Um, I always think back to the fact that, and not to be too geeky or linguistic about this, but the word society means a gathering of people, right? And I think we've lost that notion a lot of it, and that's why I've said to my kids is that, listen, we need to get back to a society. We need to get back to the fact that we are grouped together as humans on this planet. We all share various things, many more things than we think we do. And the divisiveness of modern culture is not good for us. We need to say, okay, you might have a different viewpoint of mine. Let me understand your viewpoint. Let's talk about this. Let's get together and do that. And part of that is caring for other people. And I think those are probably, to me, the two lessons that I would say to myself. But I think I had a little bit of that at age 18 because I think my mom, especially my mom and my dad, kind of instilled that in me. But I definitely have learned that lesson over my life, and I've kind of passed that on to my kids as well.
I think that's a great philosophy.
Thank you.
All right, so we're getting to the Fast and Furious finish, which is usually not fast or furious. So did you have a favorite TV show, movie, or book during high school?
Movies easy. And it's actually a tie. Monty Python and the Holy Grail and White Christmas. Still to this day, my two favorite movies. Yeah. Book, I think probably book was maybe also a tie. John Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath, had a huge impact on me, and Kurt Vonnegut, Player Piano, had a huge impact on me. So those two.
Okay.
What was the book,
Did
movie,
you
or
have a
what?
favorite TV? Did you have a favorite TV show back in the day?
TV show. Um, I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to put like time frames on. Like, I guess maybe was Cheers on then?
Oh, Cheers was that. I know MASH was then.
Oh,
Not
MASH. I would say probably MASH. If MASH was on then that was
yeah.
probably my favorite TV show then. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you have a favorite musical group or favorite artist or genre of music back in high school?
Um, well, this is probably the hardest question you could ask me because I love music and I've always had a few favorites. I would say at that time in my life, there was 10cc, Genesis, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Mm,
During high school, those were probably my three favorites music wise. Yeah.
okay. Did you have a favorite place to eat or hang out? And if so, when's the
Well, the
last time?
Echelon Mall. Um, as far as eating, I'd say probably Vito's Pizza, maybe.
Okay.
But back then you didn't have a ton of money. You
No.
could maybe go get a slice, but yeah. But as far as like even places to eat, I mean, I would just remember most of high school hanging out at the Echelon Mall.
When was the last time you were there?
Actually, I was not there not that long ago, and I remember going into the mall, and I swear tumbleweeds could have been going through there.
Yeah.
It's so empty.
Yeah. I'm seeing that in a lot of malls, but yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay. Let me do this. If I can get close enough for everybody to see. So did you like your high school yearbook and quote?
Here's funny. There's actually another good funny story. The picture I like, and it's funny because I'm packing up those things. And today, as a matter of fact, I grabbed my high school yearbook and my college yearbook. And for some reason, I think they used the same picture. Maybe, oh no, maybe it is a different picture for college.
Okay.
But it looks relatively the same. But um, so as a joke, I put ambition fascist dictator under my picture. There's two funny things about that. One is that they misspelled it. Now, I don't know if I misspelled it or they misspelled it. It's missing an S. It should be FASCIST, but it's FACIST. It's fascist dictator. Um, but that's all right. I don't know who misspelled it, my fault or their fault. But I also thought, you know what? I better never run. And I did maybe when I was much younger have ambitions to be a politician, but I thought I better not never run for political office because someone will dig that up and go, this guy wanted to
Hmm.
be a fascist dictator. So
No, you wanted to be a fascist dictator. You could have brought that out.
that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Because like Facebook, maybe you were prescient. um, all right. So this one is kind of the one I was mentioning ahead of time. So what was the name of our high school yearbook?
Eidolon? Is
Eidolon.
that what it
Yeah.
was?
Yeah. Do you know what Eidolon is?
No.
Yeah. So it's from the Greek. It means apparition or phantom, an ideal or idealized figure. Is there anything you want to say to anybody? Maybe you didn't get a chance to, or yeah.
I just want to say hi to everybody. I hope I haven't bored you with my stories or my dad jokes. And Yeah, I mean, stay in touch online. I think that's the best thing with modern technology. Even though I'll be across the pond, it'll be nice to stay in touch and also to see how everybody else's lives progress from here on. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us on It's Been How Long, and best of luck with your you're closing your practice and picking up and moving. And I hope to be in Europe at some point in the next few years. And I want that cup of coffee.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kara. It's been real pleasure, and pleasure seeing you again too.
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining me on It's Been How Long? The podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students from the late 1970s and the early 80s. A shout out to my cousin Brad Corbett, whose podcast We Weren't Friends in High School inspired me to do this podcast, and whose advice and encouragement have been so helpful. Thanks also to my husband, Randy Cockdale, who read all the fine print on the podcast hosting website so I wouldn't have to. And thanks to Jeff Lyons, content consultant and guinea pig, and to Deborah Smead, also content consultant. And thank you to all our classmates who are listening in. See you next week.